throne of Benin, information got to him of the rampaging Nupe hordes in the northern territories of Edo. So he sent a delegation led by the war commander Ode-Omi of Ova village, who was the commander of the Benin armies in the Amaho War, which was then being fought by Oba to contain the succession rebellion of Rusukwe Weapon, the Oba's half brother, in the southeastern district of Esan. The Benin royal emissary met the Nupe commander in his camp and delivered the Oba's message. This is what the message the Oba sent to him, Oba Adodo. I hear that you are engaged in the prosecution of the activity of warfare. In your march, I would ask you to look down and note the color of the soil on which you stand. If the soil is red, then know that you are already in my territories and proceed no further. Accompanying this message was a gift of an impressive number of cakes on gunpowder.
Thanks for clicking on this channel. Please subscribe to FO's blog history and click on the notification button so that whenever we upload a new video you will be notified. Benin Descendants Stakeholders Conference. Mr. Izoduwa narrated how Benin warriors stopped Nupe Jihadists in northern Nigeria from entering Benin Empire. At the Great Benin Descendants Stakeholders Conference in Benin City, Mr. Izoduwa asked a fundamental question: what has our division as a people benefited us? He went further to state that, under the command of the old imperial might of our ancestors, our collective rights were never impounded, but rather we were left to flourish in our distinguished identity. This decision is the reason why we have different Great Benin people scattered all over the face of the earth, but with the same ancestry. I must now confess, as a proud descendant of this great Benin nation, the Homers, which identify those of us whose ancestors stayed back in our ancestral home, Benin Kingdom, but we failed to reach out to our brothers outside Benin Kingdom, thereby creating a lacuna. The purpose of this stakeholders conference is to correct that 1,000 years of neglect of history and unity. The key component of our today's conference should be centered on our unity without trivializing our differences, thereby creating a volcanic resolution that vie us towards the path of our collective greatness. Suffice to state quickly, all great Benin people are equal in status and might except for our royal institutions, which is an enigma of God's blessings and valor of our ancestors. The Oba of Benin sits mighty, he stated. Mr. Izoduwa took the delegates and audience through some historical accounts of some components of the vast Benin Empire, which echoes our greatness of the past times. Knowledge of history is a precondition for political intelligence. Without history, a society shares no common memory of where it has been, or what its core values are, he added. He used Lagos, Benin relationship as a case study. Benin founded Lagos, in the 1550s, more than 450 years ago. The dukedom was founded in conquered territory, by the only sailor king that the Edos ever had. He was Oba or Hagbua, 1550–1578, son of Oba El-Sige, 1504–1550, the first of the only two Christian kings that the Benin kingdom ever had. The second was his crown prince or Hagbua, who had acquired a European education when young, in Portuguese schools overseas. It is thought that he acquired his education in Lisbon itself. On completing his elementary education, Crown Prince or Hagbua entered into a seminary and trained as a Roman Catholic priest. For the Portuguese had been relieved, on getting to Benin in the second half of the 15th century, that the African kingdom was religiously as yet a virgin territory, in that Islam had not yet percolated southwards from the Sahara to Benin. They therefore made frenetic efforts to introduce the Roman Catholic religion of Christianity into Benin, making great efforts to convert her monarchs, beginning with Oba El-Wahid I, 1440–1483, to Christianity. Their efforts fruited in Oba El-Sige, and his son and successor, Oba or Hagbua. In the course of his travels overseas to acquire his education, or Hagbua became bitten, as usually happens, by the bug of the sea. He returned home to Benin on the death of his father, and made the decision to take up his patrimony of the kingship of the kingdom, rather than to remain a Catholic priest. He also talked about how Benin warriors stopped Nupe Jihadists in northern Nigeria from entering Benin Empire. Please sit down, watch, and listen to this historically educative speech from Mr. Izoduwa. Happy viewing.
Surrounded Benin. So Benin has always been in the middle of the scheme of things. I wish to read. The Great Benin is like the natural force of nature that continues to put together its nature's component. The vast cosmological forces of the universe nourish its constituents to survive. The epistome of our shared greatness was the resolute determination of those who came before us, alias, Ode-Omi. Our job today is simply to leave the burdens of the past and embrace the sweet-smelling savour of our shared ancestry. The question to easily ask, what has our division as a people benefited us? In the behest of the travesty of the old imperial mind of our ancestors, our collective rights were never impounded, but rather we were left to flourish in our distinguished identity. This decision is the reason why we have different Great Benin people scattered all over the face of the world, but with the same ancestry. I must now confess, as a proud descendant of this great nation, the Homers, I'm sure my brother talked about it, which identify those of us whose ancestors stayed back in our ancestral home. However, we fail to reach out to their brothers, thereby creating a lacuna. The purpose of this stakeholders conference is to correct that 1,000 years of neglect of history and unity. The key component of our today's conference should be centered on our unity without trivializing our differences, thereby creating a volcanic resolution that veers towards the path of our collective greatness. Suffice to state, quickly, all Great Benin people are equal in status and minds, except for our royal institutions, which is an enigma of God's blessing and valor of our ancestors. The Oba Benin sits mighty, Oba Atokwe. At this juncture, let me take us through some historical accounts of some components of the vast Benin Empire, which echoes our greatness of the past times. Knowledge of history is a precondition for political intelligence. Without history, a society shares no common memory of where it has been or what its core values are. This was coined from times of November 12, 1994. Now we begin to break down the component. The 9 o'clock of the clock that I spoke about at Orokota is pointing towards the Lagos direction, so the Lagos-Benin relationship. Benin founded Lagos. Let's not debate that Benin did not conquer Lagos. I've done extensive research on that. There's a difference between conquest and founding. We founded it, we didn't conquer them. Because when we got there, there were no people there. So let's nobody change that narrative. Benin founded Lagos in the 1550s, more than 450 years ago. The dukedom was founded in conquered territories by the only sailor king that the Edus ever had. He was Ode-Omi, who reigned between 1550 to 1578. He was the son of Oba Esege, who reigned between 1504 to 1550. The first of the only 2 Christian kings that the Benin Kingdom ever had. The second was his crown prince Ode-Omi, who had acquired a European education when young in Portuguese schools overseas. It is thought that he acquired his education in Lisbon itself. On completing his elementary education, Crown Prince Ode-Omi entered into a seminary and was trained as a Roman Catholic priest. For the Portuguese had been relieved on getting to Benin in the second half of the 15th century that the African kingdom was religiously as yet a virgin territory, in that Islam had not yet peculated southwards from the Sahara to Benin. They therefore made a frenetic effort to introduce the Roman Catholic religion of Christianity into Benin, making great efforts to convert her monarchs, beginning with Oba I to Christianity. Their efforts fruited in Oba Esege and his son and successor Ode-Omi. In the course of his travels overseas to acquire his education, Ode-Omi became beaten, as usually happens, by the bulk of the sea. He returned home to Benin on the death of his father and made the decision to take up his patrimony of the kingship of the kingdom rather than remain a Catholic priest. This gave rise to the Benin saying, Aewoba Webo. You cannot be a priest of a deity and at the same time be the Oba of Benin. So the Obas of Benin are never priests. He had not spent a long time in his new office as the Oba of Benin when the bulk of the sea beat him and he set off with his army to add all the territories of the lagoon system, which runs parallel to the littoral of the Atlantic bight of Benin, to his dominions beginning from the Benin River in the east to the Volta Basin in present-day Ghana. In our next stakeholders, we're going to be having our GAP people amongst us. We've been consistently visiting them. So when we say what we say, we mean it. To the Volta Basin, present-day Ghana, to the west, he discovered Lagos Island and made it his field headquarters during his many years of campaigning in the Lagoon territories. He made the island his headquarters because that was a rare place along the extent of the Lagoon system, where there was a passage through which the landlocked waters of the Lagoon system flowed into the Atlantic Ocean. The dukedom, which Oba created in Lagos Island with the Benin Prince, has remained there to this day, thriving and waxing strong as the Obaship of Lagos. Still on the Benin and the Lagos, the homing instinct. At death, the bodies of the Obas of Lagos were returned to Benin City, their ancestral root, for burial. This age-old family habit of the royal house of Lagos was discontinued only about 200 years by Oba Eshiloku, who reigned from 1780 to 1819. After a struggle with Oba Adele over where the late Oba Ologun Kuteri was to be buried, Eshiloku did not want the remains of his father, Oba Ologun Kuteri, to be buried in Benin, while Adele was of the opinion that the remains of the late Oba were to be buried in Benin according to the age-long family tradition. The contest for the possession of the funeral cottage and burial rites of Oba Ologun Kuteri was won by Oba Eshiloku, who then put a stop to the hallowed practice in 1780. A quote from a report in the Sunday Vanguard newspaper of January 8, 2017 tells the story very clearly. The newspaper write-up was about the Eshiloku royal family of Lagos celebrating the memory of their ancestors. Quote, the head Eshiloku royal family, Ibrahim Balogun, on speaking on the occasion held at the Territorial Balogun Square, Lagos, said that one of the spectacular feats of Oba Eshiloku was to put a stop to the practice of taking the corpse of any deceased Oba of Lagos to Benin for burial. He said Oba Eshiloku, with courage, succeeded in retrieving the corpse of his father, Oba Ologun Kuteri. This made Oba Ologun Kuteri the first Oba of Lagos to be buried in the palace called Igon Idugaro, a feat that is still celebrated today by Eshiloku's descendants, who are today made up of 14 lineages. Benin and Lagos, impact on the international stage. Impact on the... Alright? In 1824, the Republic of Brazil in South America forcibly obtained our independence from Portugal, cutting off the umbilical cord which joined her to the European mother country, because she seized her independence from her European mother country. Other European nations were looked to extend diplomatic recognition to the new country. The Kingdom of Benin, under Oba Semede, was one of the first countries in the world to extend this South American country the diplomatic recognition which validated our independence. What we are saying is that in 1824, Brazil tried to get their independence from a European country called Portugal. But the Portugal did not agree. Other European countries did not agree as well, until the Benin Kingdom needed to grant them, agreed and accepted them for being independent, which now led to other countries accepting that Brazil was independent. The Oba of Lagos are recommended to Benin City a wealthy and literate Lagosian, a Brazilian returnee whom the Lagos people generally call Aguda, just as they call the Sierra Leonean returnees Saru. This Aguda graduate was His Excellency Manuel Alves de Lima, who became the ambassador plenipotentiary of Obasanjo of Benin to the court of the Republic of Brazil in the capital Bahia. It was only after this recognition, extended by Benin to Brazil, that other European countries like Britain and France, and then Portugal herself, extended their own diplomatic recognition to the new Latin American country. For centuries after the founding of Lagos, Eko, dukedom as an outpost of the Benin Kingdom, it contributed wealth to the material Benin city, while on the other hand, Benin sustained Lagos politically, culturally, spiritually, and at the same time, sustained our internal affairs. Only a century and a half ago, in 1834, Obasanjo responded positively to the prayers of the people of Lagos and asked the Oba of Lagos, who was then Izoduwa Ojulari, to commit suicide. Ojulari was the son of Oba Oshiloku of Lagos and a brother of Kosoko, a later Oba of the island. Ojulari promptly committed suicide, as it was a taboo for the son to set on the non-execution of such an order from the Benin Palace. For this exercise in self-immolation, Ojulari had chosen the uncertain method of poisoning rather than the quickly effective Edo method of hanging. With Ojulari's death, a civil war was averted on the island, and Adele Ajosun arrived back to Lagos from Benin City, where he had journeyed to, passing through Oyo en route, and became the next Oba of Lagos. 10 o'clock on the clock. There is a cryptic mention in Jacob Walia Ebariwa's short history of Benin, that the Ijobu once came under the sphere of influence of Benin during the reign of Oba Ozoro. It is also said that the last stock of that ultimately coalesced to become the Shekiri people, migrated from the Ijebu waterside district of Ode. This branch of the Shekiri still refers to itself collectively as the children of Lenuwa, the title of the ruler of the town of Ode in the Ijebu waterside. On the other hand, the Lenuwa of Ode told an interrogator in the 1950s that the Ode people themselves came originally from Benin. So we have in Ode and Ijebu settlement of the Lagoon, a town settled by the Edos, and from where immigrants later retraced their steps eastwards to the formation of the Shekiri region. 11 o'clock. The near Yorubas. There is a strong oral tradition in Udo town, in the Ovia Southwest local government area of Edo State, supported by documentary evidence that the Yoruba town of Udo was founded nearly 500 years ago by Udo refugees, fleeing from a civil war between the two Benin princes, Osawe, who adopted the name of Oba Esige when he became the Oba of Benin, and his brother Izoduwa, popularly known as Aaron, the Inoge of Udo. This war determined for all time the issue of whether Benin City, Edo town, would be the capital of the Benin Kingdom rather than Udo, the rival town of that period. The Inoge of Udo lost the war and committed suicide by drowning in the Udo Lake. Iziase was inclined to continue with the struggle, suffered a second defeat at the hands of Esige, and then fled with his followers into the Owosu forest and beyond, and settled down among the Yorubas. The settlement became known as Oudo Awoni Udo, the Udo people. The Iyase's name was Osemuwe, which translates, "This child is a pleasing Aifu to me," which became Yorubanized to Osemawe. It is perhaps signified that the date of the Edo-Udo War, Civil War, that is, the first decade of the 16th century, agrees with the date 1510 AD accepted by the present-day Omundos as the foundation date of Omundo town. Oba Esige came to the throne of Benin in 1504. His struggle with his brother began soon after, when the brother, the Inoge of Udo, declined to accept from the emissaries of the Benin Palace the chop of fealty to the new reign, thereby refusing the recognition of the new monarch, Esigi, as his lord. Since the founding of Ondo town, there has been no history of conflict between her and Benin. She became a conduit through which European manufactured goods from the coast, from the Benin and Lagos, reached the hinterland of the Yoruba country. The Kiriji War, the last great intra-ethnic struggle amongst the Yoruba, the centenary of which was celebrated in Yoruba land some years ago, was fought on the side of Ekiti Barako allies, partly with guns obtained from Benin, and later with the state-of-the-art guns procured by wealthy Jisha sons, resident in Lagos, and routed through Ondo to the allies. The fearful Kiriji sound made by the guns obtained through Benin gave this last of the Yoruba wars its name in history, just as the Nigeria Civil War of 67 to 70 might have been known as Tako Tako War, from the sound made at the battlefront by the Biafran infantry gun. The War or War, Akure Ekiti, Akoko. In as much as one could say that Benin had an empire, the near Yorubas to the northwest of Benin could be said to have belonged to this empire, contributing included this part of Africa. Okay, this part of Africa in an empire at the close of 19th century. It is true that in the later years of the 19th century, the Ilorin, the Ibadan, and the Nupe successfully overran the northern portions of this area, but their respective influences were transient, as conquest displaced conquest with great rapidity, until the enveloping Pax Britannica descended on the conquering and the conquered. Benin influence, being some centuries old in the area, was not easily effaceable and has lingered on to the present time. But when Akure, by virtue of their nearness to Benin, these principalities were almost continuously in a subordinate status to Benin, while the further north one went to Ekiti and beyond. The north tenors was the hold of Benin on the principalities of those areas. It is not clear in which reign Benin influence was extended to these near Yoruba areas through the tradition, though the tradition points to Obaewa, who laid the foundation of the empire and was said to have conquered 201 principalities before he hung up his sword. But the tradition is uncharacteristically silent regarding the details of the conquest. Ewa's campaign eastwards to the River Niger and across is fresher in the memory of Benin's oral tradition. The something dog is said to have drowned during the crossing of the Great River. Ewa, in consequences, put the river under an injunction, and since then, no Benin man has died by drowning in the Ohimi, or which the Igbos call the Yoshimi, the river, as Benin elders were wrought to remind their children in days past. Ewa's son Ozowa, the warrior king, added as many principalities to the empire as his father had done. He was finally mortally wounded in a war in Uzia, near Ode-Omi in Esan. The ruler of Iduani principality is said to be Ozowa's son. The Ora clan in Owan is descended from Ugwan, one of Ozowa's children. The farthest north reached by the Benin armies was the town of Osun in Ekiti, whose river Yotu became the boundary between the Benin and the Oyo spheres of influence. The campaign to these northern areas was led by Ekbenedi, the ancestral of Benin. Ekbenedi's monarch, or by Hemfuda, had earlier discontinued the habit of leading his troops physically in battle because of the injuries they had sustained during the campaign at Akure. These injuries are commemorated in the Iwu ethnic body markings of the Benin people, as accepted by one of the traditional narratives regarding the origin of the Iwu tradition, now immortalized in the Iwu dress, the modern wear of the Edo person. Much of the earlier effort as conquest and expansion, especially during the reigns of Ewaya and Ozola, was carried out using traditional implements of war. But during the reign of Obaesigi and of his son Urukwa, fire hands began to play some part in Edo warfare. A papal bull, a religious decree issued by the Pope in Rome in 1496, and binding on all Christian Europe, and forbidding the sale of firearms by Europeans to non-Christian peoples. Obaisike must have been apprised of this law by the Portuguese missionaries, and this knowledge might have played a part in the acceleration of the Oba's conversion to Christianity. This later introduction of guns into Benin warfare made overcoming easier still for the campaigning Benin armies. Professor S.A. Akintoye of the University of Ife has quoted a Yoruba saying, which was a description of those later Benin campaigns which involved the use of muskets and artillery pieces. Oba Ado Nkunile Yoruba, I can't really pronounce this one. But translated, it means the Oba Benin makes war on earth, and Ogomudu joins him in the skies. Ogomudu was another name for Shango, the Yoruba god of thunder. The sound of the thunderclap is very much like that of cannon in the field of battle. Administrations based on the system of indirect rule were set up by Benin in each vassal principalities or kingdoms. The native rulers were allowed to carry on the governance of their people. A Benin chief, preferably knowledgeable in the martial arts, was posted as a political resident to the conquered kingdom. These Benin residents was called Bale Kale by the Yorubas, among whom he lived. His presence among them ensured that the duties of vassalage due to Benin were carried out by the people as an Anwen Jew. These duties included taking to Benin City a leopard that was killed by any hunter in these Yoruba areas. So there's a saying in Yoruba, Enitio Baekun Rarari Lonado. Translated, the hunter who kills a leopard has by that achievement sent himself on a long trek to Benin. One of the articles of tribute that the Ode-Omi sent yearly to Benin consisted of large pieces of stone, quartz rock, which were used in Benin as grinding and honing stones. Benin soil is sedimentary, containing no rocks. The whole of the Niger Delta, including Benin and up to the foot of the Esan Plateau, is said to have been part of the Atlantic seabed many millions of years ago, and therefore bereft of igneous rock. That part of Nigeria was slowly retrieved from the Atlantic seabed through millions of years by the yearly deposits of continental debris brought down seasonally by the flood waters of the river Niger. These sediments created the Niger Delta, pushing the Atlantic Ocean waters farther away from the continental landmass with its seats. As the river still does today, thereby increasing on a yearly basis the landmass of the Niger Delta, which gets bigger by the day. In a million years, this process probably would have swallowed up the offshore islands of Fernando Po and perhaps also of Principe. And places like Port Harcourt and Yenagua would have become a part of the interior of Africa as Korean and West are today. So we'll talk about the protocol, the Esan, Owan, Esako, and Akoko Edo people. If people directly to the north of the Benin people of the Edo Kingdom are racially Edo, occupying territories outside the borders of the kingdom, or well within Benin's sphere of political and cultural influence. Each of the people spoke a variant of the Proto-Edo language, and all acknowledged Yoruba Benin as their sovereign, to whom their local kings were answerable, and from whom they derived their ritual authority to rule over their people. All the ethnic groups claimed descent from Benin City through communities are speckled with people from the Igala, Igbira, Nupe, and Yoruba countries, Benin and the Ishans. The least differentiated from the Benin stock amongst all the tribes of the Edo racial group are the Esans, more correctly. Accept enthusiastically the sovereignty of the Yoruba of Benin. The world before the British colonized this part of Africa 97 years ago was known to the Esans as Agbomba, the Oba's world. Every Benin arriving in Esan was regarded by the Esans as coming from the sovereign and therefore deserving of deference. They say the Esan Igbedo, the person of the Benin man, is sacrosanct to the Esan. I think in the course of these technical sessions, a lot of misrepresentations about Esan Igbedo will have to be pulled back. Even reading from this context, you will understand that it is not Esan Igbedo, it is not Benin's superiority ideology over the Esans. It simply means that since they are the closest to the Oba, they simply put that respect on the Benins, not that the Benins are superior to the Esans. I wanted to make that one very clear. So the concept of superiority should not be placed as one agenda amongst our people. Nobody is superior to the other. Regarding the relationship between the Anigi and the Oba Benin, the Esan sing, Nebuga wemi hogi, nogi ra wemi hoba, nobara wemi osalobuwa. In nobility of action, the people should emulate the Nogi. The Nogi should emulate the Oba, and the Oba should emulate the Lord God Almighty. The Nige of the nearly 30 principalities in Esan are all a gear Ada, each possessing the Ada and the Eben, the two symbols of state power in the Edo areas of the country. The Nogi of Yoruba is as the Okai Esan of Esan land, occupies the position of primus inter pares in the gathering of the Esan Enigi, though since the days of Oba Sevende, whose grandmother was an Ewohimi damsel. The Enogi of Ewohimi has become more visible than heretofore. I also want to quickly through this. From all my historical ideas about this land, I can mention 6 Obas of Benin whose mother were Esans. So there shouldn't be even any need for this unity in the first place. Whose grandmother was an Ewohimi damsel, the Enogi of Ewohimi has become more visible than heretofore. 180 years ago, Oba Semende presented Odia, the Enogi of Ewohimi, with an Odigba, the beaded neck collar of the Edo nobility. He accompanied Odigba with a gift of 2 at-size flint-long guns on tripods, which nestle in the palace of Ewohimi today and are fired ceremonially once a year. The history of conflicts between the Benin people and the Esans is scanty. Oba Azora was mortally wounded in war at Esan during the campaign against the village of Uzie, Roman's neighbor. The Esans played an important role in the regaining of the Benin throne by Prince Erediawa, later Oba Sevende. What has become known in Esan as the Amaho War of 140 years ago took place as a part of the succession struggle between the 2 elder sons of Oba Sevende, Prince Ode-Omi, later Oba Adoro, born by Ode-Omi, a lady from a West village in the Territorial district, and Ogbe Welcome, whose mother, Emege, was the daughter of the Enogi of Ebele in Esan. Emege felt that her son, allegedly born first by the reigning Oba, had been tricked out of his patrimony by the Benin people because of his Esan motherhood. Ogbe Welcome went to Esan and raised the standard of war against his brother, supported by some of the Esan Inigi of the Ujoba, Igweben, and Ebele areas. The struggle ended only when the prince died in the year 1880. In the primitive expedition against Ubuluku, that is Obo, in the Anusha district of Ikaland, launched by Oba Akembuda 200 years ago, soldiers from Esan land played a prominent role. The involvement in this war of soldiery from Opoji Tan as a contingent in the Benin army affected the ruling lineage of that Esan principality in a fundamental manner which subsists to this day. In the later reconquest of Akure by Oba Semende about 175 years ago, soldiers from Oromi distinguished themselves in battle. The campaign was led by Erebo, the Ezomo of Benin, campaigning successfully in Oye Benin and Urokosa villages and getting bigger all the time. The huge army passed through Esan and finally bivouacked off Idore in the Akoko district before hostilities commenced against Akure. The Ezomo died in this war of the smallpox and his remains were returned to Benin for interment. I will translate. Even though the clouds have darkened over, the body of the great chieftain will still be returned to Benin for burial. the Urokota Hall that is the epigenesis of the entire story. The Urokota Hall in the Benin City, of course, for some of you who do not know Urokota Hall, that is where every Oba must be coronated officially. The Urokota Hall in the city enshrines the name of the famous Esan diviner and herbalist called Okota, the eloquent. He served Obazola in 1581 to 1504 with his skills, which ensured that Ozola Hall in the palace became forever the venue where the Oba of Benin interacts with his people. Okota's house was where the hall that bears his name now stands. The Ora clan of the Owan group. This branch of the Edo family are descendants of Prince Obami, later of Ozola. The warrior king of Benin, through his son Ogwan Ozola, spent many years of his priestly life in the Owan Koko Edo district, perhaps wandering up north to Nupe land and beyond, leading the life of a warlord. The Ora people were the perpetrators of the physical earth for the Oba of Benin. Their ministrations warded off from Benin the occurrence of earthquakes, earth tremors, volcanic activity, and similar cataclysms that are associated with the geological characteristics of the planet Earth. The group, who were specialists in this service, were brought from Ora by Obaesige and settled first in the Ogbe quarters near the palace and later in the Ogbelaka district in the city. There the guild lives today, ritually exercising any harm that might come upon the land, occasioned by any violation of sexual and other taboos, among others by the citizenry. They exact a high price for their services from the guilty in the form of prescribed fines. The reigning Oba of Benin, Omonoba Eredeawa, has recently created an Ogie, a rulership for the Ora people, choosing from amongst themselves a response to the prayers of the clan. The Nota Edos of Esako and Akoko Edo. Obaesige was born with a malformed dentition. There are so many artworks that people see. There's a particular artwork that the Oba has a malformed dentition, like a protruded mouth. So that's Obaesige. So they're referring, that shows Obaesige. Obaesige was born with a malformed dentition. He had a supernumerary teeth in both the upper and lower jaws, which tended to interlock with the mouth closed. This disturbs his initiation and made necessary the creation of the title of Nohanu Nwedu, he who speaks for the Edos. This expression roughly equivalent to the Otota or the Urobus, enunciated to the people in a loud speaker voice the desires and opinions of the monarch. A time came when Esige could stand the situation no longer. The Iesakon were invited from land. When the dental surgery was completed, involving the expert feeding of the teeth, Esige lost his deformity and was able to speak directly to his people whenever he desired. This gradually marginalized the Nohanu Nwedo chieftaincy title. Oba-Adodo was on the throne of Benin. Information brought to him of the rampaging Nupe hordes in the northern territories of Edo. So he sent a delegation led by the war commander Ode-Omi of Ova village, who was the commander of the Benin armies in the Amaho War, which was then being fought by Oba-Adodo to contain the succession rebellion of Krusokwe Weapon, the Oba's half-brother, in the southeastern district of Esan. The Benin royal emissary met the Nupe commander in his camp and delivered the Oba's message. This is what the message the Oba sent to him, Oba-Adodo. I hear that you are engaged in the prosecution of the activity of warfare. In your march, I would ask you to look down and note the color of the soil on which you stand. If the soil is red, then know that you are already in my territories and proceed no further. Accompanying this message was a gift of an impressive number of kegs on gunpowder. The Agalama, which the Benin calls the Nupe, the Agalama commander looked down where he stood and saw that the soil was red. He then looked at the impressive array of the kegs of gunpowder from Benin, and his military mind sized up the situation. He accepted the gift, turned his richly caparisoned horse around and moved his army back towards the north, to other pastures nearer home. Other relations with our people in 1 o'clock, like the Galas, who we share a very strategic relationship dating back to the very foundation of our existence. Then at 3 o'clock, we have the Benins, the Anosha, the Oshiminis, and the Kas. We don't want to go through much on that. The several controversies surrounding these very unique people have spawned tremendous academic debates as to the origin of these people. The main component of the conference is to continually look into issues of the authentic history of the great Benin descendants amongst the amalgamated Anioman people. Then we'll look at 4 o'clock, Benin and Urobo / the Isoko. These large groups of people who form a sizable portion of the Delta people of Nigeria ethnically belong to the Edo stock. It is thought that they migrated from Benin during the general insecurity of the Republican period in Benin City, between the end of the reign of the last Ogisho and the coming of Oromion, son of the Benin exile prince, that is at the end of the first millennium and about 1,000 years ago. Yoruba called the Benin people Aka, a word which features in the names of some very ancient quarters in the city. There is Ogbe-Laka, the quarters of the royal musicians adjacent to the palace itself, and almost forming a part of it is the Ogbe-Nalaka, where Oba Akinboda retired to 200 years ago, when he abdicated the throne because of old age in favor of his beloved son Osifo, who later became Oba of Panosha of Benin. The rivulet, a tributary of the Oba River, which exclusively supplied drinking water to the Benin's palace for centuries, was also called Ezenaka, the Aka stream. When a satisfactory explanation becomes available for this Urobo name for the Benin people, some light will be thrown on a few more aspects of the common history of the two people that remains obscure at the present. The Urobos, like the Esans and the northern Edos, have always looked up to Benin City as their ancestral home. They call the Oba of Benin Oruwakpo, the owner of the world. Before the British colonized this part of the world 90 years ago, the word was to the Urobo Akboroba, the Oba's world. The word since the British colonization of Benin and our territories has become to the Urobo Akboroyibo, the white man's world. The Ovi of an Urobo or Soko clan derived the right to rule over his people from the Oba of Benin. The underpinnings of this authority were in the Benin palace until he received the order from Benin. He could not order the execution of any of his subjects. In the second decade of the 20th century, after the restoration of the monarchy in Benin following the death of Oba Aboramin in Calabar, the British political officers of the Warri and Benin provinces had a busy time dealing with the difficulties that arose regarding the many newly installed Ivie of Uroboland. I think that's the plural of Ivie of Uroboland. Each of these Ivie desired to obtain the ritual sanctioning by the new Oba of Benin of his accession to the throne of his fathers. But this would have meant allowing a purely traditional matter to cross the British-made political boundaries of the Warri and Benin provinces. The residents of Warri province felt that the kind of leisure of subordination of Warri to the Benin province, moreover, it detracted from the British-derived authority given to the Ishekiri chief, Dorinoma, to exercise traditional political authority over the whole of Warri province. During this time, the Ivie were firmly discouraged by the Warri colonial official from further looking up to Benin. A well-remembered example of a Benin young man who sojourned in Uroboland and did well in the trade was Edo, son of a Benin chief. He sojourned to Kokori waterside during the reign of Oba Semeden and became immensely rich as a middleman trader. He was invited back to Benin during the reign of Oba Adolo to take up the vacant Iyase title, a vacancy created by the death of the Iyase Noheme. He moved his household from Ikpekori to Benin, accompanied by his great horde of Urobo wives, children, and Urobo retainers. He is therefore known in Benin history as Iyase Noduo, the Iyase that came from Uroboland. In conclusion, they are to the sea, where we have the royalty of the Shekiri as well, and some very distinct tribes of the Jaw, the Query, Ekpe, Ogba, Degeman, and a whole lot more of great Benin descendants, biting at the confluence of Focados and Orashi River. The list is quite humongous for us to explicitly talk about in details. As a conference, we deal with all of these issues. I welcome you all to your ancestral home and pray that by the power of God and our ancestors, we'll begin to take bold steps that will further the growth and rise of the once glorious and mighty empire, where great kings have been born, and the citadel of the God King, Yoruba of Benin. God bless all great Benin descendants. God bless all great Benin kings. God bless the new nation that will rise again, over across the world.